Greetings, everyone. Those tuning in through IG, those tuning in through Facebook. My IG sort of kind of crazy, but whatever. Um, yeah. So greetings. Um, my name is Cassandra Floyd, also known as the Daughter of the Fates. I am the founder of the Temple of Evolutionary Emergence. These lives are a project of the Temple of Evolutionary Emergence. Um, the temple will be a year, reaching its first year anniversary in November. And so these lives that I do are not for my health. They are purposeful. They are to build and continue to grow the Temple of Evolutionary Emergence. Um, so, for those of you who are in the know, today, like every day, Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard PM, we are in the process of reading the book Pure Lust by Mary Daly. Pure Lust by Mary Daly. The subtitle is Elemental Feminist Philosophy. We are still in chapter 1. I started reading this book to you guys on Thursday of last week. We read the introduction, and we are continuing with reading chapter 1. Let's see. Yeah, we still got a ways to go in chapter 1. She was a, you know, um, an intellectual. Oh my God. Chapter 1 is a long chapter. Yeah, so we still got ways on chapter 1. I don't even think we're going to finish chapter 1 tonight. But the read has been dynamic anyway, child. Mind blowing, wig splitting, gut punching, chest kicking, jaw cracking. this book. We ain't even halfway through chapter 1. It is intense. Um, it is intense. The book was written by Mary Daly, as I said at the beginning, in the year 1983. So Mary Daly. The reason I'm reading this book is the primary reason is because Mary Daly was referenced many times in the first book that we read together, which was The Great Cosmic Mother Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth. Mary Daly was one who, I forget what chapter it was in that book, but who talked about the original origin of the word sin, the pre-Judaistic origin of the word sin, which meant to be or to live, right? And so I got to thinking about that the other day, and I was like, I know what we gonna do. We gonna read Pure Lust by Mary Daly. I have not read it, so as I'm reading it to you, I am reading it for the first time. So that being said, I'm only going to do these readings every day for an hour with a quick introduction. You can make comments, you can ask questions on Wednesday, tomorrow. After the read, we'll be having a brief discussion later on in the evening. Tonight, we're actually going to do a live tarot reading. Greetings, my Amy. Tonight, we're going to, at 9:36 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're going to do a live tarot reading tonight at 9:36 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Tomorrow, we'll do the reading at 5 o'clock, and then tomorrow evening at 9:36 Pacific Standard Time, we will do a Zoom call to discuss both the book that we're currently reading, which is Pure Lust, and to also discuss The Great Cosmic Mother Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth. That will be an interactive, meeting, because we'll be meeting via Zoom. I'll be giving you guys the Zoom link if you're interested in participating. But several people have mentioned that they really liked the book club study process that we had done during while reading The Great Cosmic Mother, and wanted to start that again. So we're calling that our Wednesday Temple Oracle study. That'll be happening at 9:36 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow night. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. Those of you who have purchased the book Pure Lust and are reading along, we're starting at the bottom of page 54. For those of you who are just listening, we're still in chapter 1 of this book on the section around regarding pornography. It is within this context of imposed intellectual deprivation, the infliction of biggest lies, that a feminist analysis of such gynocidal phenomena as pornography should be situated. Indeed, pornography, as well as the behavior in which it reflects and perpetuates, cannot really be understood if it is construed as a separate and distinct phenomenon from other expressions of Sado ideology. Thus, for example, pornography, nuclear ideology, and theology are in many ways the same. A key link between patriarchal theology and pornography, then, is total arrogance and the promulgation of deception. Andrea Dworkin has discussed the pornographic lie. Quote, pornographic conceit is that the normal female demands force, the violence, the pain. This pornographic conceit accounts for the fact that men in general do not believe that rape or battery are violations of female will. End quote. Greetings, Carlotta. Moreover, women in general do not know that men in general believe and sustain this lie. Thus, women are force-fed the lie concerning this lie. Nevertheless, the pornographic lie is at least subliminally conveyed to all women in the culture, even as it is being overtly denied. Given these conditions, it is not surprising that even young girls who are raped generally feel guilt and defilement as well as rage. Every woman is affected by the basic pornographic message that women want it. Having been forced to swallow this biggest lie, the victims of such mental torture continue to argue for justice, rationality, and human liberation, and to be grateful for the slightest concessions, while remaining unable to see that their basic right to being is denied by the Sado society. Indeed, in this reversal world, women who would claim this basic right are considered arrogant. Oh my God. In her discussion of the Marquis de Sade, Dworkin states, quote, the arrogance of women in claiming any rights over their own bodies is particularly offensive to the Sade. Any uppity pretense to bodily integrity on a woman's part must be fiercely and horribly punished. Sade, of course, does not stand undefended. He has been applauded for his genius by countless radical biographers and admirers. The fact that theological pornography, so this section is called Papal pornography. The fact that theological pornography uses similar strategies in trapping women into fixed behavior was illustrated by a November 7, 1980 declaration of Pope John Paul II attacking the women's liberation movement as contrary to women's vocation to motherhood. It is not astonishing that such arrogance comes from this source. It is noteworthy, however, that Christian women reacted with knee-jerk response of the tortured when confronted with biggest lies, begging for crumbs of reasonableness. Thus, women theologians circulated a petition timidly stating, quote, we believe that the women's liberation movement in its primary purposes is a just and necessary corrective to the long centuries of subjugation of women to secondary participation in human development. We call upon the Pope to better acquaint himself with the actual concerns of this movement and to enter into dialogue with the women themselves who are members of this movement, end quote. By reducing the women's movement to a corrective, by seeming to believe that the Pope is capable of acquainting himself with the actual concerns of this movement, by suggesting that radical women would enter into dialogue with him, the petition writers and signers were attempting to appear reasonable in order to obtain a modicum of rationality in return. Their mistake lies in failing to confront the fact that they are dealing with dealers of the biggest lies, from whom there is no hope of rationality. Such genuflecting gestures, begging for minute, begging for minute truths and moderated lies, are exercises in self-abasement and absurdity, and can be compared to petitioning hardcore porn peddlers to acquaint themselves with the actual concerns of the women's movement and enter into dialogue about the ethics of their multi-billion-dollar gynocidal industry. The end result of such politics of prostration is frustration and the reinforcement of the biggest lies. Scientific pornography concerning nature. Sado ideology that thrives on female degradation extends itself to the destruction of nature, enforcing a kind of involuntary asceticism upon other species as well. Not surprisingly, the strategy of spreading biggest lies is used to legitimate this torture. J.E. Lovelock, in his work Gaia: A New Look at Life on Earth, exemplifies the bureaucratic view of nature personified as Gaia. He writes, quote, "The evolution of Homo sapien, with his technological inventiveness and his increasingly subtle communications network, has vastly increased Gaia's range of perception. She is now, through us, awake and aware of herself. She has seen the reflection of her fair face through the eyes of astronauts and the television cameras of orbiting spacecrafts. Our sensations of wonder and pleasure, our capacity for conscious thought and speculation, our restless curiosity and drive are hers to share." Ugh. End quote. This cock or cat, I told y'all, so bear with me. She makes up a lot of words to describe the different aspects and personifications of patriarchy. This cockocratic assessment of Earth's need for Homo sapiens, read men, in order to be awake and aware of herself, to see her own fair face, and to have any sensations or drive would be even more obviously obscene if Lovelock's readers had not been preschooled by the language of true romance. Lovelock's expression of lust for Gaia, the earth goddess, is obscene in the traditional way. It fixes the stage for the more moderate droning of Rene Dubois, author of The Wooing of Earth, who writes, quote, "The phrase, the wooing of earth, suggests that the relationship between humankind and nature should be one of respect and love rather than domination. Among people, the outcome of wooing can be rich, satisfying, and lastingly successful only if both partners are modified by their association so as to become better adapted to each other. Furthermore, the outcome is more interesting when both partners retain elements of their individuality, of their own wildness." End quote. The reader of this pathetically fallacious passage may be wooed, lulled into overlooking what wooing is all about, into forgetting which partner is modified and is reduced to retaining only broken elements of her own individuality and wildness. Dubois' euphemism, exhortation to exploitation, sounds like a liberal treatise on Christian marriage. Readers who have been fixed by pseudo spiritual propaganda that women and men are partners in Christian marriage could be seduced by the analogy, for within the lecherous state lies mirror lies, reducing each other endlessly. Women who ingest this deceptive droning, legitimating the rape of nature, become even more susceptible when nature analogies are used to seduce women into a victim role. Women as mirrors of sadoasceticism. Women have ingested negative and masochistic self-images implanted by the smallish rulers, images that have spawned self-loathing, a need for punishment, hatred of other women, which results in horizontal violence. Within the Christian tradition, one consequence has been saintly masochism. Simone de Beauvoir discussed this several decades ago. Quote, "Saint Angela of Foligno tells us that she drank with delight the water in which she had just washed lepers' hands and feet. Oh my God. We know that Marie Alaquay cleaned up vomit of a patient with her tongue. In her biography, she describes the joy she felt when she filled her mouth with the excrement of a man sick with diarrhea. Jesus rewarded her when she held her lips pressed against his sacred heart for 3 hours. Ugh. Greetings, Abasi. Ugh. Yo, this bullshit. As Desjardins concisely explains, quote, she, Marie Alaquay, was the one who offered to the adoration of her faithful the great red clot surrounding with the flame darts of love, end quote. There is also ample evidence of the masochistic fantasies of female mystics brooding over the lacerated body of Christ. It should be noted that the self-defiling acts of these feminine saintly masochists are acts of self-denying flight, not from their own desire, but from natural disgust. They are attempts, goddamn, oh shit. They are attempts at self-purification as the saints perceive this to be required of them by a male god. Moreover, these women were accurate in their assessment of the male god's demands. It is significant that the God-man Jesus is believed to have rewarded Alaquay immediately for swallowing the male patient's excrement. It is equally significant that the church legitimated this behavior and this fantasy by officially promoting the veneration of the Sacred Heart. Nags will not avoid noting that in the history of patriarchal symbolism, heart is frequently substituted for the phallus. Given this background, the encoded message of Alaquay's vision is evident and astonishing. There can be no doubt that the societal embedding of false guilt has had a major role in the manufacture of such feminine masochism. As Barrington Moore remarks, quote, over the centuries, the Catholic Church has had considerable success in expropriating guilt. It has achieved this by helping to create the sense of guilt and then providing the bureaucratic mechanisms for alleviating that guilt. As an economist might put the point, the Catholic Church managed to create much of the demand and most of the supply. Yeah, I think. While Moore's criticism of the Catholic Church's breeding of guilt is applicable to the cases of female saints described above, his analysis, in fact, does not do justice to other religions and ideologies of phallicism. For all phallic religions and ideology directly or indirectly install guilt in women. Uh-oh, 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 uh-oh. Moreover, there is more to the problem than false guilt. Within the Sado state, women are ontologically undermined. For the Sado intent is the conversion of female participation in being into mere existence. That is, excuse me, the conversion of women into things and into complicity in thinghood. To the extent that phallic lust succeeds, women are reduced to non-being. Insights concerning how this ontological reduction relates to sadomasochism in women can be gained from Ernest Becker's analysis of sadomasochism. He writes, quote, the sadomasochist is someone who has trouble believing in the validity and sanctity of people's insides, their spirit, personality, or self. These insides could be his own or others. If they are his own, he tends to be masochistic. If they are others, he tends to be called a sadist. End quote. Women who have been thingified, deprived of conscious participation in being, have trouble believing in the sanctity of women's insides, both their own or those of other women. This doubt extends to spirit, personality, and self. Within Sado society, this doubt applies first to a woman's own participation in being. It extends to the being of all women. Thus, the disorder, which I shall call masosadism, is injected into women to the extent that this injection takes a woman. This injection takes a woman is rendered incapable of moral outrage on her. Goddamn! Listen, oh my God. To the extent that this injection takes, a woman is rendered incapable of moral outrage on her own behalf as a woman and on behalf of the race of women. Oh my God. Her outrage has been expropriated. She may experience and be informed about atrocities against women, and yet she is unable to feel sustained rage against the perpetrators of atrocities, and incapable of acting against the men who are the originators, rulers, and controlling legitimators of the Sado state. Oh, son of a... Woo! Oh my God. Woo! Oh my God. God damn. Y'all, like, let me close this door. I don't know what the fuck they doing this late in the evening. Hold on. I don't know if y'all can hear all that shit, but I can hear it. Anyway. I don't know if y'all was rocking with that last paragraph, but damn. Listen, while you watching this bullshit reality TV and can't figure out what is the purpose, what is the origin of, what is the underpinning for always pitting women against women in reality TV, always pitting black women against black women for the affection of some bum ass nobody who probably ain't doing right by either of them any motherfucking way. This is the essence. This is the origin of that shit. It's like this book written in 1983 was like not predicting, because somebody read this book and created a blueprint for future relations among humans in society. Because baby, listen, I'm gonna just read that little section again. Damn, she went in. Damn, she went in. I told you when we were reading The Great Cosmic Mother, the chapter on what was the chapter called? The Machine. I was like, there is no way somebody did not read that book before creating the movie The Matrix. They read that book and damn near took word for word from that book to create The Matrix. I'm gonna read this again because that shit was profound. It extends to the being of all women. This disorder, which I call masosadism, is injected into all women. To the extent that this injection takes, a woman is rendered incapable of moral outrage on her own behalf and on behalf of the race of women. Her outrage has been expropriated. She may experience and be informed about the atrocities against women, and yet she is unable to feel sustained rage against the perpetrators of those atrocities, and incapable of acting against the men who are the originators, rulers, and controlling legitimators of the Sado state. Masosadism then fixes women. This injected variation of phallic sadomasochism is totally and antipathetic to feminism. It is utterly inimical to the living of feminism, to the race and racing of women. For this reason, the phallocratic war against women requires continual injections of masosadism. The instruments of these God. Whoa. Oh my God. The instruments of these injections: fairy tales, fashion, theology, psychology, romance novels and literature, etc., are all tools of snools. Oh my God. The next section: Masosadism as Eucharistic. The passage cited above from Ernest Becker unwillingly illustrates a phenomenon which I call the Eucharistic syndrome of the Sado society. The passage describes the sadomasochistic inability to believe in the insides of himself or the other. To translate this into ontological terms, he cannot get beyond appearances to being. To put it into Aristotelian technological philosophical terms, he cannot get beyond accidents to substance. Thus, since perceptible expressions such as speech and visible and tangible physical gestures of affection are to be discounted unless these involve pain or humiliation. All intercourse, ranging from the most impassioned philosophic, poetic, and musical language to the most intimate physical embrace, is to be disbelieved. It is not to be trusted to disclose what is substantial underneath. This pattern is consistent with the pattern of Eucharistic belief and disbelief, which requires unquestioning acceptance of mediated information concerning what is behind or under the so-called accidents and appearances. Y'all ain't following? Such intellectual self-denial is ontologically obscene, for it subverts basic. Oh my God. Such intellectual self-denial is ontologically obscene, for it subverts our basic confidence of the natural, elemental knowing, which is participation in meta-being. It converts the naming of natural elemental acts into stunted, possessed symbols, tracking and inhibiting the capacity of believers to ride metaphors spontaneously as vehicles to and from meta-being. When faculties are thus trained, oh my God, y'all. When faculties are thus trained into self-blockage, it becomes difficult to believe in the insides of oneself or others. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, oh my God. The role assigned to women within such a setup is archetypically masosadistic. Since women are not the myth makers, theologians, priests, distributors within such a system, but rather, since women are not the myth makers, theologians, priests, distributors within such a system, but rather the passive recipients, the female role, shared, of course, by some males, is that of the blocked rather than the blockers. Of course, some women are instruments of spreading the blockage of meta-being. Although they are not the originators of this syndrome, they are blockers by derivation, that is, token torturers. Oh, token torturers, and thus participate in the destruction through masosadism. It is instructive to read further in Becker's analysis of sadomasochism. Quote, when one does not believe in the validity of one's own inner being and powers, and when one cannot relate to others as integral and unified persons, then the private self, the inner mystery, becomes a threat. Therefore, the mystery that others conceal in their inner selves must be brought to light by whatever means at one's disposal. In this way, it can be rendered safe, or it can be justly exposed as the fraud that it is. End quote. The fact that this passage appears to be gender-free disguises the real situation, which is Sado society. Women are constantly bombarded with propaganda intended to force acceptance of Eucharistic obscenity, the denial of our own elemental sensory and intellectual powers, which inhibits conscious participation in meta being. The fact that the one who does not believe, oh my God, one does not believe in one's, let's see. The fact is that one who does not believe in the validity of one's own inner being and powers, the male, would logically be the one who manufactures and requires belief in such dogmas as the Eucharist, such ideologies as the pornographic conceit, and such technological manifestations of this mentality as the nuclear attack submarine named Corpus Christi. Clearly, women are not the fabricators of these phenomena. It is not difficult to know the gender of the one who cannot relate to the others as integral and unified persons, or to know gender-wise who is threatened by whose private self and inner mystery. Within the Sado state, women are always regarded as mysterious, and of course, women are the essential targets of the pornography and sadistic behavior that seeks to bring to light this mystery so that it can be rendered safe and exposed as a fraud. God. Oh, God. That is the purpose of rape, woman battering, the sexual abuse of female children, the multi-billion-dollar porn industry. Yet physical violence and violation are not sufficient to render female being unthreatening to males. The whole program requires that women become collaborators in being exposed as frauds. This enforced collaboration requires that women be inducted into the state of Masosadism, that they be rendered incapable of knowing and naming the fact of this induction and indoctrination. That is, the Sado society requires that the hooking of women into Masosadism be Eucharistic. Thus, conditioned women will conform behaviorally, participating in the verification process, which proves female integrity to be the fraud that it is. Y'all ain't following. Woo. Secondary aspect of masosadism, that is the sadism and horizontal violence towards other women that results from implanted masochism, self-hatred, converts women who have been hooked by the sadomasochistic society into hookers of other women. Abasi, what did we just talk about today? What did we just talk about on the phone an hour before I got up on here? Damn. Oh my God. In this deceptive chain of psychic vampirism, the master vampire, the sadistic fixer framer, is lost sight of. Oh my God. And the masosadistic hookers and drainers are rendered more and more visible and less comprehensible. The dependent, derivative, drained, and draining victims function to protect and disguise Dracula himself. Shit. God damn. Oh my God. It's even deeper than that, Letitia. Me and Abasi just got off the phone for about an hour, literally right before coming on this call. And I was telling him about this documentary that I saw today about the human trafficking of women from Kenya into India. So when I first started seeing the documentary, I'm already mad at Indian men because I think this is some shit that is being facilitated by men in India, wooing these women from Kenya to become prostitutes in the human trafficking trade. And then the documentary goes on following this sister who went to Kenya thinking she was going to be a student and do some work for a private family, end up and working with tourists, end up a prostitute in this brothel being led by two women. One was called Mother, and the two were called Mother, but one was the lead mom and the other was like the secondary mom. She was the princess, right? And these women were vicious in their keeping of the brothel, right? And so even the documentarian, which is a sister who works for the BBC, the documentarian is talking about these women that have been keeping the brothel, the two mothers, right? Because they called it a family tree of human trafficking. The grandmother, the two mothers, and all the women that are being trafficked are the sisters, right? So you going through this documentary, and this black woman is talking about these two evil black women who deceive these women from Kenya and woo them with promises of resources and then put them to work under the most, hostile and brutal conditions and this and that and this and that and this and that. Now I'm thinking it's Indian men that's leading this whole thing. When the women start going to what they call the kitchens, so there are these kitchens scattered throughout India. I didn't even know there was that many Africans in India. They have a whole city, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Africans from Nigeria, Uganda, Sudan, and Kenya living in India in whole little townships and cities and shit. And in the African townships in India, they have these, like what it reminded me of when they first started talking about it was like juke joints in the South, where, alcohol wasn't legal. It was during the Prohibition period. So you would go to a juke joint to turn up. So you go into these kitchens, which were like juke joints. Everybody drinking, everybody having a good time. You feel me? Everybody dancing. But what it is a place for women who are being trafficked to go and wait for Johns to come and pick them out the crowd. So the women get drunk and get messed up on drugs so they can, quote, be out of body when they have to do these deeds they're being forced to do, right? And so everybody that is soliciting these transactions with these women are black men from Nigeria. Every single one of them are black men from Nigeria. So I knew as soon as the girl went out to go do street walking, it was going to be Indian men, exploiting these sisters. That was what I was thinking when I first saw. And all of a sudden, every face I see is some black man. And the girl starts talking about these stories that she has to live with and endure and shit. And so the story is going on, and the whole story is focused on these two diabolical black women who run this brothel. Child, lo and behold, this dude who works with the Indian government, he has gotten awards. He's been on TV. He has this big, giant organization that rallies for the rights, the social justice rights of Africans living in India. Big, nationally known organization. This dude is the founder and figurehead of this organization called ANICA, I think. He's, in headlines, on interviews with all the big wigs in India. This dude is the primary facilitator of all human trafficking of African women on the continent, in India, in the country of India. This man, blacker than me, is who they call the father of the industry. He runs all the kitchens. Y'all, goddamn. And so here, she talking about hookers, women, through their own conditioning and subjugation. And so, let me just say, the dude who is the kingpin of all human trafficking of African women in India, you feel me? The way they talked about these two black women, I knew just because of the way they were living. I was like, these women ain't balling out of control. These women are squatting. These women, all the two women running the brothel, living just like the women that they didn't traffic. They didn't convince to come over here and did the setup. You feel me? They all sharing rooms. They living in squalor. You feel me? 15 girls living in one apartment and shit. You feel me? So I'm like, well, they ain't balling out of control. So it's got to be somebody. It's got to be somebody else. But the whole time, this black woman is just focusing on these two black women. Then all towards the end of the documentary, they find this dude, this Negro, who is the king of all human trafficking of African women in India. Meanwhile, rubbing elbows, you feel me, with all these bigwigs who think he's just doing this wonderful work for all the African, immigrants in India and shit. And come to find out that, just like I suspected, the two women who were, quote, the brutal madams, setting up these women to come up to India and under false pretenses, had they themselves been trafficked. And what happened was they get these girls to come and work in human trafficking, and they get them short-term visas, 3-month visas, but then have them caught up in a way where the debts that the women owe for getting to India would take more than 3 months to work. Also, the women end up trapped. Typically, they can't leave the industry because now they're illegal immigrants in a country. Their passports have been seized by their pimps or their madams, so they are trapped in this cycle where they cannot get out of this human trafficking. And so the cycle continues. And so what happens is, once you can't get out, you can't figure out how to work, you can't figure out how to move, and you can't get back home. The only option presented to you is to trick other sisters into coming so that now you can become a madam and begin to make a profit and not be forever working for somebody where all your money goes to this somebody. We was just talking about this an hour before we got on this show. You understand? And here she says, the secondary aspect of masosadism is that the sadism and horizontal violence towards other women that results from implanted masochism and self-hatred converts women who have been hooked by the sadomasochistic society into hookers of other women into the shit. In this deceptive chain of psychic vampirism, the master vampire, the Negro who was running the whole trade in the first place, the master vampire, the sadistic fixer and framer, is lost in sight of. And the masosadistic hookers and drainers are rendered more and more visible as the bad guys and less comprehensible. The dependent derivative drained and draining victims function is to protect and disguise Dracula himself. The woman kept saying it. These terrible women, these diabolical women, how he can do this to women. Meanwhile, the whole thing was these women was trapped. They wasn't innocent, but they did what they did because they were trapped in this cycle where they couldn't get out of where the hell they were and could not support themselves economically because of the conditions that they had been forced into. The only option that they had been presented with is to seduce other women into coming to Kenya to maintain the trade. Meanwhile, Dracula himself is protected and disguised as this philanthropic motherfucker who is rubbing elbows with bigwigs in India, wearing suits and ties and shit. Meanwhile, running an entire brothel, a city-wide brothel of African women to be exploited by African men in India. Y'all, goddamn. The complicity in the act. Environmental philosophers can be aided in disclosing the fraud involved in the syndrome of the Sado Society through application of the metaphysical concepts of potency and act. Let's see, I'm going to read one of these comments. Letitia said, let me just post it. Letitia says, I met this white male in Miami in 2018, and he told me he helped refugee women from Haiti by giving them jobs. He gave me his business card and was trying to trap me. See? It happens a lot to women, especially foreign women. Yes, yes, yes. As a technical term, potency usually has been understood in a passive sense, referring to the capacity to be acted upon. Potency, or potentia in Latin, however, also has an active meaning, that is, capacity to act, power. God is said to have potency only in this second sense, for he is said to be pure act, having no passive potency, which would imply limitations, and omnipotent, having total active power. The sadospiritual male, who equates himself with God, attempts to cover his sense of impotence, lack of a sense of inner being and power, by his erection of the Eucharistic pornographic conceit. As reversal king, he plays God, the pure act becoming purely an actor, lusting for the reduction of everything else to purely an act, to fraud. The lust to reduce everything to fraud is not simply a desire to fool others. The lecher desires to force them into complicity in the act, to break the inner core of integrity so that there is no longer any threatening inner mystery. In this broken down state, the victims know the falseness and endure it. And adore it, elect it even. The election of actor President Ronald Reagan and the massive uncritical adultation of the conservative Pope John Paul II illustrate this phenomena of mental degradation, female complicity in the act of masosadism, sensory deprivation. The continued complicity of women in the act is further ensured by the imposed asceticism of sensory deprivation, often combined with sensory overload. Oh shit. Increasingly pervasive, sensory deprivation is particularly lethal because, while largely unnoticed, it paralyzes its victims, destroying the capacity to feel and know deeply, passionately, and therefore to act authentically. Most inhabitants of towns and cities are forced to exist in sensory deprivation environments, which are mediated environments. As gerrymander has suggested, the modern office building is the archetypal example of the mediated environment. It contains small, square, flat spaces. Its decor is rigidly uniform. It has hermetically sealed windows. Its sound environment is homogenized. Its light is constant. The end result, oh my God, is that all the senses are dulled. Damn. The end result is that all senses are dulled. To glimpse the scope of this wasteland of boredom, one need only think of modern supermarkets, department stores, hospitals, universities, apartment buildings, sterile and uniform suburban neighborhoods. Y'all ain't here. She is talking about right now today. This book could have been written right now on this day. Right now on this day. As I am watching YouTube channels that are talking about how we are exposed to less and less color as human beings since the turn of the 20th century, deliberately. Listen, there are whole studies, scientific studies that are talked about how human beings in capitalist society have disappeared large numbers of colors from the general population since 1920, deliberately to dull the senses of human beings and to blunt their emotions. And here she go in 1983 when this book was written, talking about to get a glimpse of the scope of this wasteland of boredom. One need only think of modern supermarkets, department stores, hospitals, universities, apartment buildings, sterling uniforms, suburban neighborhoods. As we have seen, conditions in the factories in which working class women toil sometimes carry sensory deprivation to the extreme of damaging, even destroying the sensory capacities exploited by the work. Some of the consequences of sensory deprivation are noted by Mander. Quote, what we see, hear, touch, taste, smell, feel, and understand about the world has been processed for us. Our experiences of the world can no longer be called direct or primary. They are secondary, mediated experiences. One consequence of this mediation is the enforcement and reinforcement of fixocracy. With senses this fixed, women must struggle to feel elemental connections. Miranda observes, quote, when we reduce an aspect of environment from varied and multidimensional to fixed, we also change the human being who lives within it. The human being then becomes a creature with a narrower range of abilities and fewer feelings about the loss. We become grosser, simpler, less varied, like the environment with which we exist. Nags will notice that the use of the pronoun we makes this statement deceptive, as are countless common expressions such as when we decide to stockpile nuclear weapons or when we destroyed Vietnam. The agent is misnamed, falsely including readers who have not chosen this pathological destruction of the environment. Unfortunately, it is not within Mander's range of intellectual and emotional vision to notice that his uncritical use of conventional grammar contributes to the smog of sensory deprivation and therefore is consonant with the mediated environment he criticizes. Nags note that as a result of such fallow grammar and other tools of snooldom, including, of course, fallow technology, women and others are deprived into becoming grosser, simpler, less varied, like the environment. Sadosexual politics. To the extent that she is reduced to becoming grosser, simpler, less varied, a woman is a ready target for sadosexual politics. These are the politics of the effacement of women. John Stolenberg, who by reason of gender privilege has had access to information not directly available to women, describes a major contemporary manifestation of this phenomenon. Quote, culturally, the emergence of male homosexual sadomasochism from underground has coincided with a burgeoning of overt sadism against women in all the communications media. Thus, coincidence has not been by chance. While gay activists were campaigning against stereotypical images of gay people in the media, male homosexuals who have direct access to media have been promoting with a vengeance all the stereotypes of female masochism. We are witnessing the conversion of what was once deemed a gay sensibility with what was once deemed a heterosexual sensibility. That conversion is conspicuously a male sensibility, and it now reveals itself fully as thriving on female degradation. End quote. The division of gay sensibility and heterosexual sensibility is, of course, a delusionary dichotomy. Male mating has always manifested itself under the guise of heterosexuality throughout Sado society. As I have already pointed out, the imprinting of images of female masochism is paralytic to women. These amount, in fact, to injections of masosadism, which is the most essential weapon in the phallocratic war against women, the most basic tool in this blockage of the race of women. Phallocratic male sensibility indeed reveals itself as thriving on female degradation. It would appear almost too obvious to mention the fact that women do not thrive on degradation. Yet the culture of biggest lies has succeeded in obscuring even that blatant fact, suggesting that it is fulfilling, some women, from Alicu to Freudian Helene Dutch to some contemporary sexually liberated women, have swallowed this ideological excrement, acted it out, and distributed it further. Stoltenberg's analysis yields further insights relevant to this disturbing behavior. Discussing male homosexual sadomasochism, he points out that the assumed masochism of gay males differs significantly from female masochism because, quote, the male homosexual's drive to incorporate manliness functions as the male's homosexual drive to incorporate manliness functions as dissociating himself the inferior status of the female, whereas the masochism of a woman functions to fix her in that state. Oh. God damn. In fact, sadomasochistic acts between two males are ritualized games between phallic peers. Thus, quote, in any erotic encounter between two homosexual males, there really are two male sexual identities at stake. But the sexuality appropriate to male sexual identity reification is derived from a heterosexual model based on blotting out the other. Oh, shit. True to their privileged status as genital males in society, the partners are at liberty to trade roles in private without jeopardizing their status in the culture in any way. A crucial emotional adjunct to that agreement is their mutual derision of genital females, whose actual powerlessness they are at liberty to mock. Oh my God. Yo. Damn. Child. The quote, let's see. Oh no, that's the end of that quote. The pathetic attempts of some women to mimic this role playing feeds into the phallic fixation factories of snooldom. Apparently unable to experience the elemental zest of being spiritually, passionately, sexually, intellectually, they seek instead the drab excitement of bored boys joining jockocracy, disseminating boredom. Stoltenberg accurately names the game. Quote, in order to believe that relationships between sadists and masochists are liberated, one would have to believe that contempt is caring, that humiliation is respect, that brutality is affection, that bondage is freedom. The fact that many women do so believe is a measure of the extent to which men have destroyed women's consciousness. Yes, Letitia. Yes, Letitia. I'm going to show this comment because, yes, Letitia says it reminds me, this section that she was just talking about, these gay boys being at liberty to still mock women, and even though they're gay, not losing their status in society as male, even among heterosexual society as male. She says, it reminds me of what you said about the gay male who tried to touch your breast, touch your chest. Yes, exactly. The entitlement to women's bodies, even as you do not desire them sexually, but still feel entitled to touch, to feel upon, to rub up against, to judge, to mock. Yo. Listen. He said, Stoltenberg says, quote, in order to believe that relationships between sadists and masochists are liberated, one would have to believe that contempt is caring, that humiliation is respect, that brutality is affection, and that bondage is freedom. The fact that many women do so believe this is a measure of the extent to which men have destroyed women's consciousness. I mean, I said that. Child, look. When women, sexual masosadism, when women, whether heterosexual or lesbian, whose consciousness has been thus destroyed, proclaim themselves pro-sadomasochism, pro-pornography, and hail the story of O as our pornography, they may be exercising free speech, but they are speaking neither as feminist nor for feminist. Since the inherent logic of their position is simply anti-feminist, they do not represent a split or a struggle within the feminist movement. Rather, they become tools of Sado society in its continuing effort to destroy female consciousness. In order to understand the role of pseudo-feminist sexual masosadism of the 80s in the destruction of woman-identified consciousness, I will briefly note here some aspects of the wider society, the snooldom in which pseudo-radicalism mirrors. First, the increasing conservatism of the society generates a syndrome which Andrea Dworkin has identified as characterizing women of the right, namely, an obsessive need for safety, shelter, rules, form, and love. Unwittingly, masosadistic women are playing in chic contemporary style very old games expressing self-hatred and horizontal violence. The prizes for playing the game are safety and shelter from reality, rules and form in place of pure lust, rather than threatening the gynocidal establishment. Masosadists support it. Second, it follows that contemporary pseudo-radical masosadism mirrors that characteristic of the Sado society, which I have identified as reversal. Appearing to be feminist, it is in fact inimical to feminism. It is man-made, delusory, sexual liberation, and to describe it and other such travesties, I invoke the expression foreground feminism. Third, masosadism mirrors the triumph of the therapeutic which prevails in the therapeutic which prevails in Sado society. Absorbed in self-indulgent acting out, the feminist practitioners of sexual masosadism have little energy for knowing and acting in a radically creative way. Masosadistic politics and horizontal violence. It is within the context of creeping pseudo-feminist masosadism in the 80s and of the Sado asceticism which this mirrors, that the issue of horizontal violence among women who have chosen to name themselves feminists and or lesbians can be understood. I refer specifically to the irrational, mind-binding conversion of terms such as racist, classist, and elitist into labels that function to hinder rather than to foster the movement and the race of women. First, it is important to see some points of commonality between such verbal abuse and stigmatizing and the masosadistic sexual practices, which are expressions of the destruction of the women's consciousness and the perversion of women's energies. Just as masosadistic sexual practices reflect compulsive needs for safety, shelter, rules, and form, not totally unlike those of extremely conservative women, so also the masosadistic politics of horizontally violent labeling reflect such obsessions. Rather than threatening the phallocentric establishment, women who practice such politics support this state by diverting energy into female self-destruction and by blocking woman-identified creativity. Y'all ain't hearing? There's preaching happening. Moreover, the practitioners of horizontal violence also mirror that strategy of the Sado society, which I have called reversal. For instead of naming the active perpetrators of the social evils they claim to oppose, they choose to cowardly devise they choose the cowardly device of scapegoating women. Rather than confronting real danger, they promote among women the very atmosphere of irrationality, stigmatization, and hatred, which endanger all women. Oh, woo, I wish I had an organ in the background. Mm-mm, 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 mm-mm. Oh my God. Listen, superimpose this paragraph on the goings on of today. On the goings on, look at the discussions of women happening, levied towards women, African women in particular, in the entertainment industry, acting, music, the like. Any woman. Now, there's so much in here. It's so loaded. It's so loaded because what she is talking about, and I took issue with. Let me just say this. I took issue with this when I was reading The Great Cosmic Mother, because there's a whole section in The Great Cosmic Mother about Barbara Moore's position. Because she was a feminist, she wrote the book in 1987. It was a different world. Her hardcore, staunch opposition to pornography, right? And I understood that position in opposition to pornography. However, and this position here, in her hardcore opposition to pornography, especially as pornography's origin is exploitative, is oppressive towards women. That's its origin. Pornography's origin is in the Roman Catholic Church, right? And partner to the exploitation of women in pornography, the centering of men's lust, toxic lust towards female bodies in these positions, right? However, when she talks about, what she say? Oh, okay, here. This might be a whole workshop we have to do. How far have we come or fallen back in the year 2023 in discussions of the difference between feminism, sexual empowerment, because feminism has had two prongs itself. It has been centered, one aspect of feminism has been centered in the empowerment of women, but in this weird way that is equally suppressive of women's sexuality. This kind of like this weird subjugation or suppressing of women's sexuality in order to, quote, become feministically empowered. And on the other hand, that suppression of women's sexuality being put forward by feminists as extraordinarily hostile to the sexual expression of other women who see feminism centered around sexual empowerment and what that means for them, how they, what that means for them individually, right? This is like, I'm just going to keep reading since I ain't got much time. I'm actually over time. Let's see. Moreover, the practitioners of horizontal violence, and she equates these splits as horizontal violence, okay? Moreover, the practitioners of horizontal violence also mirror that strategy of Sado society, which I call the reversal. For instead of naming the active perpetrators of the societal evils they claim to oppose, they choose the cowardly device of scapegoating other women. Rather than confronting, and you hear this all the time. One of you just asked me the other day, what do you think about India Ari going off on Meg Thee Stallion for twerking at the Essence Festival? This is what she's talking about right here. This is what she's talking about right here. This is what she's talking about right here. Instead of naming the active perpetrators of all society's evils, all of society's evils, social evils, they instead, instead of naming the active perpetrators of the societal evils they claim to oppose, they choose the cowardly device of scapegoating other women. Rather than confronting the real danger, they promote among women the very atmosphere of irrationality and stigmatization and the hatred which endangers all women. That's what she's talking about. We see it every day. Respectability politics coming out of the mouths of women who have never experienced safety under the guise of respectability. Name a woman you know who, because she was, quote, respectable, a good Christian, wearing turtlenecks and motherfucking skirts down to her knees, has not had any aggression levied towards her by males because she was respectable. See, she respectable, so we ain't gonna fuck with her. We gonna go down the street and find one of these unrespectable women and harass them, rape them, brutalize them, terrorize them. Name one woman you know where respectability politics has preserved their goddamn life and state of being from the aggressions of men. This is what she's talking about right here. In 1983. Rather than confronting real danger, they promote among women the very atmosphere of irrationality, stigmatization, and hatred which endanger all women. In addition, like the practitioners of masosadistic sexual obsession, the promoters of scapegoating and stigmatization mirror the therapeutic society, absorbed in self-indulgent acting of such roles as judge, penitent, and judge penitent. They distract from the fact that women are raped, beaten, maimed, killed, and dismembered by males of all nations, of all classes, of all races, in all times, and in all places on a planet dominated by phallocracy. The hidden agenda of these politics is male identification, which is mal-identification. Some of the reported events at the UN Conference on Women held in Copenhagen in July 1980 illustrated this phenomenon, which has titillated the media masters. An article in the Boston Globe, gleefully entitled Beyond International Sisterhood, described the events of the conference. Quote, they, the delegates, debated whether the conference should condemn female circumcision. Some feared that such a condemnation would reflect unfavorably on the African and Arab countries where the barbaric custom is still practiced. Some felt it would look as though industrialized nations were imposing their values on the third world. Many have expressed surprise that a women's conference, especially an international women's conference, could be torn apart in such a fashion on so many levels. Surely, the UN conference challenges the naive assumption that women exist in a political vacuum where some kind of international sisterhood takes precedence over national self-interest, end quote. This is 1980. Licking their chops over female self-betrayal, the editors then finished their meal with a sermon on perfection, droning that in a perfect world, women, quote, would have pledged to work together to fight sexism and religious fanaticism and political ideologies that keep women down. But this is not a perfect world, and women are all only, end quote. Covering the same conference, the Associated Press reported, while paying lip service to improving the lot of women, many speaking appear to be using the conference as a platform to promote national political viewpoints on the world's problem, end quote, on the world's problems, end quote. And the Times gloated, quote, so many of the women so slavishly followed the dictates of their male-dominated foreign offices that a Danish journalist dubbed the conversation, the convocation, quote, the men's conference of women. This was in the time. The men's conference of women. The Time men are specific. Quote, even the issue of female circumcision, which some feminists thought might unite the gathering, was caught up in third world politics, end quote. And I think I am going to stop there because I'm over time and my neighbors are being really rude and loud. Okay, so we're going to stop there until tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And tonight on the reading of the book. So we're done with the book for tonight until tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But at 9:36 p.m. tonight, I will be doing only for 30 minutes, because these nighttime things that I can tell are going to wipe me out. Only for 30 minutes this evening. Oh, yes, yes. I'm going to post your comment, Letitia. Yes, me too. That book was deep. Anyway, so tonight, only for 30 minutes. If you have a question that you want answered, I will be doing a live tarot reading this night at Tuesday at 9:36 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Only for 30 minutes. You ask one question. It is $11 per question. For that period of time, you can ask up to 3 questions. So it is up to 3 questions, $11 a question. You will see how to make the donations and contributions for that reading. You can ask a question. I will pull a card for you and answer your question. That is tonight at 9:36 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I will be doing that live from IG, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. So I'm going to end the reading of the book for those of you who joined late. The book is Pure Lust. Elemental philosophy. Elemental Feminist Philosophy by Mary Daly. Pure Lust, Elemental Feminist Philosophy by Mary Daly. I'm going to end the reading of that book for tonight. I will see you again tomorrow for the continued reading of Pure Lust tonight at 9:36. If you're interested in the live tarot reading that I will be doing, and until then, I will see you later. This is Cassandra Floyd, also known as the Daughter of the Fates, founder of the Temple of Evolutionary Emergence. And I will see you guys this evening or tomorrow if you decide to tune back in for the book reading.